welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya Master Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Anne-Marie, it's a very appropriate thing that our guest, Pericles Rellas, is joining us today. And the reason I say that is, as you know, I've done marketing for years, and I've had my own money issues for years. Lots of people who listen to the show have money issues. You know, this is not an uncommon thing.
No.
But as you also know, I have a new service I've launched, subtitled Your Daily Dose of Happy, just like this podcast is. And I am doing some Facebook advertising in order to get that thing off the ground. And something I've had at best mixed experiences with in the past, a lot of which triggered me in terms of my own issues where money has been concerned. Well, Facebook has changed their marketing so drastically that literally in the past you had all kinds of control over where you would send your marketing message to. You now have almost none,
Really?
almost no control at all. Yeah. So I had to come face to face with all of my fears and say, all right, how much do I believe in this thing that I'm putting together? And the belief actually has carried me through to the point where I said, okay, I'm committing a serious bit of change to give this thing a try.
You are.
Yeah.
But you know also it's amazing.
Oh, yeah. Well, my conscious mind knows that. I'm trying to convince my heart of that. That's the hard part. Gosh, I said, oh, yeah, sure. Logic, easy. No big deal. Yeah. And then the emotions get in the way.
Damn those things.
Yeah. Well, that's where we're trying to appreciate them, right? Yeah. So we're going to learn more about how that appreciation works, I'm sure, with our guest today, who has probably the coolest name of any guest we've had on the show. I mean, Pericles, are you kidding me?
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
I mean, next thing you know, you guys start telling us some Greek mythology or something like that. I mean, this is just
don't get me started.
Don't get you started. Well, we'll just start with a family tree and work from there, right? Okay.
Yes, exactly.
So welcome to the program. First of all, how you doing? You're in really, really, really sunny Las Vegas. I mean,
yes,
so
I am.
Roasting right now.
Yes, it has been very hot. It was so funny. We had a cool, like this day where it cooled off and everybody was so excited. It was like 95, it's been so hot here. The 95 feels cooler. It's been crazy.
Yeah, there are a lot of people around the country here in the U.S. shaking their heads saying 95 is cool, really?
Yeah.
But by comparison, it is, especially when it's dry heat. I mean, it's relatively cooler.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, we're dealing with sometimes 95 here, but it's also with 90% humidity, and that's a little bit of a different thing.
Yeah, humidity kills me. I'll take a dry heat over a humidity any day of the week. Yes,
absolutely. Yes. So, well, we'll try to ship some your way, but that's another story for another time.
Right now, we'll take it.
But you are, I think it's safe to say, a money master. Now, maybe that may not be the term that you apply to yourself, but I mean, you're in the field, so sorry you get stuck with a label. That's the way it is. That's the way these things work.
Well, I'm not going to poo-poo it. I appreciate it. And I always refer to myself as a money mindset expert, just somebody, I've been doing this for a while. And I think mastery does come with a certain amount of experience, but also I think one of the most important parts of mastery is realizing you've never arrived, that we're always on a journey. And so I am on a forever journey in this lifetime, and understanding my relationship with money, how it flows in my life, and then helping other people do the same thing.
Yeah, I think that was the key word in that entire sentence, flows, right? Because that's the make or break right there.
Yeah, I think it's something that most people don't really think about as it relates to money. One of the early distinctions that I discovered around money was that it's a currency, which we all know, but as a currency, it flows like a current. It flows like water or electricity or air. And with that in mind, it has a very distinct way in which it flows, which is the kind of the core of all of the work that I do. Money flows in a circle. So most things flow in one direction. Water will flow downstream and electricity will flow from point A to point B. But money as a universal band of energy actually flows in a circle. And we intersect that circle. And so it flows to us, through us, and away from us. and then back around to us, through us, and away from us. And then there's this reservoir on the side that we get to keep. Now, because it flows in this circle, a block anywhere in that flow is a block everywhere in the flow. And we could all relate easily to, water flowing downriver. If you dam it up upstream, it's going to restrict the amount of water that's flowing downstream. But what we don't look at is we have blocks in the flow of money coming to us. And I'll share with you what some of those look like. And we also have blocks in the flow of money going away from us. And because any block in that flow is a block everywhere in the flow, it impacts ultimately that reservoir on the side that we get to keep. So let's look at some of the blocks in the flow of money coming to us. We say things, or we think things like, I hate my boss. I hate my job. The wealthy are evil, or money is evil, or it's dirty, or it's bad. Those are all kind of in the background thoughts. They're your money mindset, or what I like to call your financial thermostat. They limit how much money can flow to you. They actually block that flow, just like a dam upstream.
Very effectively, I might add. I know from
very effectively, yes. Just look at the experience around you, right? You can see how effective it is. Wow, it's not flowing. And then blocks in the flow of money going away from us are things like, I hate to pay my bills. I have the money. I just don't want to pay them. They're a big organization. They can afford it. I hate paying taxes. All of those things where we're just holding on to money. We don't want to let it go. Those are also blocks in the flow of money. And so ultimately, as I said, any block in that flow is a block everywhere. And then it impacts our ability to keep that reservoir on the side, or build that reservoir on the side that we want to keep. And so there's a very specific method that I teach all of my clients to how to clear those blocks. So first and foremost, you have to notice the blocks. And while you were talking about it a little bit earlier, you were saying, you're on this new venture and you had to confront this, Facebook ads and all those things. And I would actually suggest it wasn't your heart that was the block. It was these unconscious or subconscious thoughts from mindset blocks in the flow of money that impact our ability to have money flow to us abundantly. And then they show up as fear or worry or concern or doubt, or all those things that we have on our day-to-day basis. So here's how we clear those blocks. First, you have to notice it. You have to notice what that conversation is. Oh, wow, I think money's evil. Okay, you notice it and you own it. Okay, I can own that I have that thought. I don't care where it came from, but there it is. I have that thought. Then the second step is, you have to release the thought. You have to let it go, and you have to say it out loud. You can't just think it. You have to say out loud, I release that thought. I release it into the care of the universe. I release it into the care of God, God's hands, the tree outside, the beach, wherever you want to release it to is totally fine. But you have to take the action of saying, I'm releasing it. It is no longer mine. I no longer own it. And then in that space, we've now created this empty space. Now we want to create, what is your relationship to money going to be? And you can say whatever it is you want, make sure it's in a positive, not in a negative. So you can say something like, money flows freely and abundantly into my life every single day. Money loves showing up in my life every single day. I love and appreciate money for everything that it can provide me and everything it can't provide me, right? Replace it with that. And so we're clearing these blocks in the flow of money. And then what ends up happening is suddenly we start to notice, wow, money's flowing to me more abundantly than I ever expected. There are more opportunities for me to make money than I ever saw before, simply because we're now clearing those blocks in the flow.
Interesting points you're making. First of all, I appreciate that you point out the value of the thought as opposed to the emotion, because I think that question really comes to the core of it for me, and perhaps for other people as well. In one way, I kind of want to take issue with it, and the reason I say that is I used to be very much in the camp that said it was really about what your thoughts were, and I still am to a large extent.
Yep.
But I also discovered that wasn't enough, that there was something else going on. And it took some deep digging to discover that there were emotional things going on that weren't even mine. They were familial. They were generational.
Yeah.
And So when I look at that side of it, I say to myself, okay, well, how much of that is emotional and how much of that is my thought process? Because my conscious thought process really wasn't aware of that at all.
Mm. Yeah, this is a great point that you're bringing up, Walton, and I appreciate your wanting to challenge these conversations, because for all of us, we have to bring that critical thinking to it, and we have to look at it from many different perspectives.
Mm.
So one of the things that I think it's been demonstrated many times is that there's the mind doesn't know the difference between something you're thinking and something you're actually experiencing.
Mm.
So we can be thinking about something and having an emotional response. We can be experiencing something and having an emotional response.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want people to do is distinguish between the two and create one as an active and let go of the other one. In other words, we all have so many thoughts every single day. I mean, some of the thoughts that pass through my head, they're insane. You would literally want to lock somebody up with the thoughts that go through my mind. But it doesn't mean that I'm an insane or bad person. It just means that we have these random thoughts. We can't help them. It's which thoughts are we going to focus on?
Mm.
Which thoughts are we going to feed? And which thoughts are we going to then take action on?
Yeah.
That's what separates us from instinct to generative life. And that's where most of us get the power to create the life that we want. When we start to see, well, I'm not a sum of my thoughts. I'm a sum of, or a product of, the thoughts I feed and the actions that I take based on the thoughts that I choose to feed. That's what separates us from people who are just impulsive, who just say whatever comes to mind or do whatever comes to mind. Now, here's how it impacts our money situation is we have this subconscious thought. It elicits an emotional response. We don't necessarily recognize or acknowledge it. And then we end up taking action based on that emotional response. So a great example of this is, and this is where our financial thermostat comes in. Our financial thermostat determines how much money we can earn. It determines how much money we can keep. And it also determines our thoughts, feelings, and emotions around money. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people, if we look at the statistics, 70 to 80% of all lotto winners go broke within the first 5 years. Now, these are people who've made a huge amount of money in a very short period of time, and suddenly they're bankrupt. We see the stories over and over and over again. Well, how does that happen? Their financial thermostat setting is not at a place that can accommodate that kind of money. Mm-hmm. They don't realize it. They don't even know that they have a financial thermostat setting. It's kind of like your thermostat in your house. You set it at 72 and it's really hot outside. You open the windows like it is here in Vegas and all that hot air comes in. What does it do? It kicks on the AC. All it's designed to do is maintain that stasis, 72 degrees. It doesn't have any thought process. It's just instinctive, reactive. Same thing with our financial thermostat. We make all this money, but we don't have a setting to accommodate and manage that kind of money. So what do? We start taking action after action after action to disappear that money. We are the AC kicking on. And so we can see people taking these actions like, why are you doing that? Why did you just buy that? That's a huge waste of money, but they can't help themselves. We want to shift from not being able to help ourselves to actually seeing the behavior that we're having in the moment and then adjusting it so that what we're doing is adjusting our financial thermostats in the same way so that we can accommodate more and more and more and more and more money. We get to keep more. We can actually spend more, but we're not disappearing money. We're increasing the flow in that circle, and we're increasing the flow on that reservoir on the side that we get to keep.
I like your phrase, disappearing money, because it can actually work in a couple different ways. You talked about that circle, right? How you have stuff coming in toward you, you block that. You can also block stuff going out away from you. So you have both those pieces going on. And then you have the really special people like me who can do it in both directions at the same time.
Well, I hate to rain on your parade. You are special, but not in that way, because we all have blocks in both areas. For some people, there'll be more blocks on one side than the other. And I think for most of us, it's probably the blocks in the flow of money coming to us are we're all really good at spending money, right? We look at, how people are around money. They generally spend more than they have or more than they earn, right? And so no matter how much they earn, they're always disappearing it. It was one of the reasons I actually started the work that I do was 30 years ago when I was working with business clients. My whole purpose was to have them be more successful, grow their business, make more money. Well, after the first 4 months, they were all making more money. It was awesome. And I just kept waiting to talk to them and say, okay, how are you excited? How's it going? And they're like, well, yeah, I'm making more money, but I'm still behind. I'm still behind every month. And that's where I noticed there's something going on here. And I started to study it. We can earn a lot of money. Some people's thermostat for earning money is huge, but their thermostat for spending it's even higher. And so no matter how much they earn, they're always going to spend more because their thermostat is set at, you can't have any money. You can't keep more than this amount of money. So anything they earn above and beyond that is going to just get disappeared. And it literally just disappears. I mean, how many of your listeners right now are thinking to myself, I don't know where my money goes every month. It just disappears. It's a common conversation. And that's our financial thermostat hard at work.
Well, I think there's also at least one other category, because I've actually been one who always knew where my money was going. It was one of the things my dad taught me very early, was tracking my own money. In fact, my siblings still think I'm a little bit crazy for following that track, but nevertheless, that's what I do. I don't do it quite the way my dad did it, thank God. The way he did it was just insane, but he didn't have a computer. The computer is so much easier.
Yes.
He had spreadsheets like you wouldn't believe. It was incredible. And he tried
Pulled
to
out
teach
and
me, and I said,
unfolding.
okay, no. And I'm really logical, and I really know math, and I would scratch my head saying, wow, this is where you're spending all your time? You're doing this? Woo. Okay. So it was even a bit much for me. But one thing that I can say is that despite the fact that I track the money, and I'm actually pretty good at making sure my outgo doesn't exceed my income, for me, that's not been the issue. I mean, there was a time when it was the issue. Right after the 2008 financial crisis, my business got blown up and my ex-wife's business got blown up. So basically, for the next 4 or 5 years, our outgo was going to be beyond our income just because we're trying to catch up and figure out how to make this thing work. But for the most part, that's not been my pattern. My pattern has historically been do all these really cool things and the money doesn't come in. So not quite the same thing.
Yeah. Yes. And this is great because I'll share with you from my personal experience, because I had the exact same situation. There was a point when I first launched into my career and I wanted to make more money. And I noticed I kept hitting this financial ceiling. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get beyond this certain place. You'd see there'd be this great opportunity.
The ceiling would actually come lower. The ceiling would like start hitting me in the head.
Right. And that's definitely another setting. It's like, whoa, what's happening here? I'm getting compressed.
Right.
But there's this experience, and many people can relate to what you're saying. Is
like my hair is on fire. Look how much it's affecting me. I can fix that.
And what I noticed was I noticed in this moment of, it was kind of like, I don't know if I can't remember if I was meditating or what I was doing, but there was something I did where I was really getting connected to my higher self. We do that by getting connected through our heart, and that connects us to our higher self, whatever that is for you, whether it's God or the universe or something else. And I really just was connecting and looking at, okay, what's going on here? Why am I not able to go beyond where I've been able to go? And in that moment, I had this memory of when I was about 6 years old. And I'm going to date myself here. We were watching this show called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous and how their lives are a mess. Remember that?
Sure.
And I was sitting with my family and we were watching one of their episodes, and it was a disaster, right? These people had all this money and their lives were just a mess and everything fell apart. And I remember at the end of the show, my mom saying very nonchalantly, without any backstory to it, like she wasn't trying to make a point. It was just very simple. She said, I never want to have that much money. You will lose your whole family.
Yes, right.
Right. And in that
great
instant,
message, right?
Well, I'm sorry, what?
Great message, right?
Well, it's true. And she wasn't thinking about it from the perspective, oh, I want to say something horrible or that's going to set my son on this trajectory. But she said it because that's what she believed. She truly believed that you have that much money, you will lose your whole family. And so in that moment, and now we're talking about those generational mindsets, in that moment, that generational mindset got placed with me. And I didn't know that it was there until I was in that kind of quiet, contemplative state many years later. And I realized, wow, I really believe that. I've believed that up until this point in my life. And then I immediately used those 3 steps. I acknowledged it and owned it. And then I released it and let it go.
Mhm.
And then I created a new way of relating to money. And in that moment, literally in that moment, I could feel that ceiling get shattered. And I have been able to increase what I earn, increase what I keep, increase my overall relationship with money in a very positive way, simply because of recognizing and acknowledging that mindset that was probably passed down from her parents and
Oh, yeah.
her grandparents and great grandparents, etc.
Yeah, and which ties in beautifully with the original points you were making. The very first point being you had to recognize it. That it's a hard one to recognize. You have to kind of do some digging to realize, oh, that was actually going on.
Yeah, and some people will say, well, what if I can't remember that? And it's a great question, because we can't always remember the exact situation.
No.
And it's not something that's important. All you need to do is recognize that something's going on. So if you don't remember the exact moment and you can't understand, well, I have this glass ceiling, and all you can articulate is, why can't I get beyond where I am? Why can't I get beyond where I am? That's all you need to do, is say, in that moment, I recognize that in this moment, there's something there that's having me say, why can't I get beyond where I am? I release and I let go of that conversation. I surrender it into the care of the universe, into the care of God, whatever that is, and let it go. And then create something new in that moment. So you don't have to know exactly where it came from. You just have to understand and articulate that something's going on, release the something, own it, release it, and create something new.
I can see that will at least work sometimes. I do know, though, from experience, that that doesn't always work for me. There are times where I've tried to do that kind of little broader approach to releasing, and it doesn't release. I may go through the motions. I may try. I may, I'm putting my best emotion. I'm putting my best thoughts into it, and so forth.
Yeah.
And then through a week later, I realize, oh, it's back again.
Really great.
And-
Well, there are some that are going to be a little bit more deep seated, and there are some that are going to take a little bit more effort. And this is something I share with people who are grieving, who are dealing with something that's traumatic in their lives, and they want to move beyond it. Now, look, I'm no expert, I'm no doctor in grief or anything like that, but I know what's worked for me and what's worked for my clients. And if this works for you, great, use it. If it doesn't, find something that does. But oftentimes in grief, what happens is people think, well, I need to go through grief the way people say you need to go through grief. It needs to look a certain way. No, grief needs to look the way it looks on you. And it needs to work through the way it needs to work through in your life, in your moment, in your situation. And so one of the things I say to try is, if you're dealing with something that's traumatic, you need to go somewhere that's quiet and you're safe and you're alone. And we need to let out all the anger and the rage and the upset and the frustration and the whatever it is that's there. And you need to let it out audibly and physically and emotionally.
Yes.
And it looks like screaming and yelling and raging. Look, God, the universe, you can handle it. It's nothing for them, right? But for us, it's like poison in our lives. And we have to let it out at this level and keep letting it out and keep letting it out and keep letting it out until we have a sense of peace. And then we can create something new. And then it may show up again, because sometimes things need more than one take at it. And great, I'm going to go do it again. Do it again, do it again, do it again. Let go, let go, let go. And then put in place that thing that you've created. And it may take a little bit more time, but that extra added oomph and letting it go is going to make the difference. So while I would recommend trying that and see how that works. And again, for anyone watching this, don't feel like, oh, it didn't work, I'm a failure. No, it just didn't work in this moment. Try it again. And if that doesn't work, try something else. Anyone who tells you they have the answer for everything, run for the hills. I'm clear I don't have the answer for everyone, right? There is no one thing that's the right answer for everyone. There's the one thing that's the right answer for you. Find that one thing. If it's something I say, great. If it's something someone else says, great. But pull it towards you. Don't operate from, well, it's got to be this way, because that's a recipe for failure.
No, I agree. Yeah. And I like the way that you expressed that too, because I would say it differently, but literally the approach that I've used is very, very similar to what you described. The way I think about it is, when I'm doing that release, that emotional release that you were describing there, I think of it in terms of releasing until the emotion dissipates.
Right.
I don't stop until as long as I'm feeling the emotion, keep going. Do I still feel it? 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 Keep going. It's starting to fade. Keep going. It's starting to fade some more. Keep going until finally it fades. And I say it dramatically that way. The part that really amazes me is that when I go through that process, when I actually allow myself to do that, it's incredible how fast it fades.
Yes.
I mean, I thought it would take like weeks. It takes 3 minutes. It's
Well, I like to use the analogy, and it's a little bit gross, but if when we get sick, and we have to vomit, it's kind of like if you vomit the first time and then you try to hold the rest in. No, you got to let it all out. And sometimes it goes on, and you're just thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, when is this going to stop? Right? But we've got to allow the process to go fully to its end, where we find that place of that sense of peace, that sense of calm, that sense of full release. And it may take some time. Don't judge yourself. Don't beat yourself up.
Right.
If whoever's listening to this finds that it's taking longer, great. It's taking longer for you. Let it go. Continue to let it go. As Walt, you were saying, until you get to that place of peace.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I also like the fact that you kept saying, go back to it. Don't stop. If you didn't get the first time, do it the second time. If you didn't get the second time, do it the third time.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've had to go back on my particular issue, because it was pretty deep set. I mean, you tell me if you've seen this. I kind of suspect you have with your clients. One thing I've noticed, because I've had lots of guests on the program over the years who have, they're money experts in one way or another. And the thing that, it isn't 100%. It's probably about 80%, but 80% of those who have had significant success have family who have had significant success. There's a familiar pattern that goes on there, whereas there's also the familial pattern that goes on for people who have family with no success or anti-success, which is pretty much descriptive of my family. And there's a very big deal there that goes on with what gets passed along to us.
Yes,
and it can take a while to find it. It can take, it can be a challenge. And Marie and I both went through a course called TIA, which is TIA is an acronym. It stands for Trust Your Abundance. And one of the things that you do is you go through doing exactly this. They call it transgressors, but it's basically the same thing, just identifying whatever that thing is, usually from early childhood, that has been hanging on, hanging over your head and affecting you in ways you didn't even know about, and then releasing the damn thing.
Right. Yes. It's very powerful. The exercise is very powerful, and it really does work. I think there's something else and what you're speaking to is that generational mindset, that mindset that's
it's bigger than I thought it was. I never realized it was that big.
Oh, yeah. I knew somebody who was raised as a child. Every night when he went to bed, his mother would take him over to his piggy bank and they'd put money into it. And then he'd go to bed. And when he was sleeping, she'd go put more money in. And then the next morning he'd count his money and he'd say, wow, my money grew. And his mom said, yeah, your money will always grow.
Wow.
He grew up in that money falls out of the sky everywhere he goes, because he was raised in that kind of mindset.
Yeah.
And it's important for us to start instilling those kinds of mindsets, at least the kinds of structures where kids can see money growing around them every single day. So they're raised inside of that, because then you meet people who, if they were to trip over something, they'd trip over a bucket of money, and then they'd fall into a hole that's filled with money, because that's the life that they live. Money is just everywhere for them. Now, the important thing is that we want to make sure we have a balance for all of this, because it's not just about money.
Right.
I know lots of people, and I've worked with lots of people who are on the list, Forbes top 10 wealthiest people, talking a billionaire with a B, and they're miserable. They have no sense of satisfaction and joy in their life. They can afford the greatest things, and I've watched them fly on private jets and yachts and all these things, and they're miserable 24/7. So it's not about the money. The money's not going to give you happiness. I'm sorry if I'm bursting somebody's bubble, but if you think money is going to buy you joy or happiness, satisfaction or fulfillment, you're on a path to upset and disappointment. And I've seen it. And I've seen people with very little money who live absolutely joyous, fulfilled lives. Now, find that balance for yourself. I'm not saying don't make more money. If you want to make more money, great. Go make more money, but always make sure you're balanced with, are you happy? Are you satisfied?
Definitely.
Exactly, Anne-Marie. Or are you stuck in that treadmill of, well, I'll be happy once I'm earning this, or once I have that. that you're just going to end up chasing for the rest of your life until you keel over and you're going to be like, well, he didn't make it. She didn't make that, didn't get there. Be there right now. Find that place in your life where you have that joy and fulfillment. Because ultimately, that's what we say we want money for, so we can be happy. Well, what if you found the happiness first and you were actually happy without the money? Then the money could flow more easily and abundantly in our life. That's what the law of attraction is all about.
Right.
Finding that vibrational frequency of joy and happiness, fulfillment and satisfaction and gratitude, so that we're vibrating at that frequency. And that's what we attract more of. And it's that simple. Now, where a lot of people go wrong is, and this is where they go wrong in manifesting, is they go, okay, I'm going to manifest what I want. The woman of my dream, the man of my dreams, the money of my dreams, all of those things. And they start then to try to force it out. And this is what Abraham hit.
Hello.
Right, exactly. Well, this is what Abraham
We've got hammers, haven't we, trying to get in?
Right? These big picks and shovels out there. We're trying to manhandle it through. But this is what they mean when they're saying you have to allow it. We don't allow it because we want it to look a certain way, or we expect it to look a certain way, and we're forcing it. Allowing it is, look, the universe can make something happen in a nanosecond. I manifested the relationship of my dreams in a nanosecond, and it took about a year for it to show up, right? But if you look at the process of what had to happen for us to actually meet, it was extraordinary. The universe handled very quickly, but we can't interfere in allowing it to happen and just watch for what shows up. The universe will put so many opportunities in our path, and we can look at and explore and acknowledge each one of them, and then choose the one that we want to follow through on. Let go of the ones that we don't find as a fit, but choose the ones that we do. But when we just kind of, oh, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. Well, you're just throwing dirt in the face of the universe, and the universe is going to say, well, I've just put 5 great opportunities in front of you, and you just kick sand in the face of all of them. I guess you're really not ready for that. So there you go. Manifesting.
Emery, I get the feeling about 15 of these points that Pericles has made has hit home. Which one hit home the biggest so far?
Oh my gosh, they all have. I feel I've got money multiple personality disorder because I think I've been through so many stages. I've been, I feel abundant and I am abundant and money has flowed. And then there's been the other times. And recently I have noticed, and I'm lucky enough, I save a good chunk of my wage. But in the last few months, I've noticed that there's always something to buy. There's always something that needs replaced. And I've like stopped thinking like that, Anne-Marie, because it's just generating more and more. Like this morning, got a flat tire, buying kids' school uniform. Oh, she needs this, she needs that, the stuff that I didn't know. There always needs to be. So I'm just like, right, we've got to switch this off because I've been abundant and I know how I thought then. But you're right. It's just a case that I think probably it's not going as deep as I thought. Because when you were saying, I released that thought and I'm like, but I wouldn't believe when the positive thing saying money flows to me, but I imagine that comes with time. But you're right, you have to dig deeper. Okay, so I've digged deep, but I haven't obviously gone deep enough because I'm like, well, I stay, I know what my money goes on. There's only so many pairs of jeans and shoes a girl needs, and I don't overspend, so I'm fortunate that, and I do save, but I've got to dig deeper, and I want to land in that pot of pennies.
Well, this is so great because you're saying 2 things at once. One is you want to release it, and it's always something.
Yes.
So that money mindset of that block, it's that block in the flow of it's always something. That's something my mom used to say all the time too. It's always something. It's always something. I remember somebody when I was growing up told me, it wasn't in my family, it was somebody that I knew, said, oh, Pericles, you're going to always have debt. So don't worry about that. You're just going to always have debt. Well, I grew up in in high school, as soon as I got a credit card, lots of debt, right? That was just because I knew I was just going to always have debt. No, it was just a money mindset. It was a block in the flow where I just knew I just had to keep creating more debt because it was just going to always have debt, or there's always something. So let go of it's always something. And then, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry, Anne-Marie, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's actually right. Because I've noticed that thought. And I like, and you can see it starting to happen. I'm like, come on, sort out. You know how to do this. It's just like the frustration.
Yeah.
But I also think another point you made is about the children, because also I'm like, what do I do? Do I not buy my kids stuff so that they don't get stuff, or do I buy them what they want because they know that they can manifest whatever they want? And these kids manifest a lot of free stuff, but for me, it's like, how do you navigate not messing your kids up, but not turning them into brats?
Right. Well, I think we want to be two-headed about this because we're parents and we want to be able to provide for our kids things that they need, right? But then things that they want, we can start to create a conversation with them and say, I mean, my kids are grown and out of the house, but I don't know what an allowance is now. I don't know what it is in the UK versus what it would be here in the US if kids still get allowances or not when they're young. But if they do get an allowance and there's something they want versus something they need, they need a new uniform for school. Okay, great. We got to go get that. But if it's something in the area of want, then we can sit down with them and say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a game around you being able to get what you want, the things that you want. So every week we're going to take from the amount of money that you get as an allowance, and we're going to divide it up into 2 separate vessels. And get them, 2 inexpensive glass vessels. It can be jars or cups or whatever it is you want. I don't care. Something around the house is easy. One of them is long-term, that they're not going to touch. They may not get it right now, but this is what we're going to start training money to flow in the direction of your retirement when you get older. Right now in the UK, I know they have, pensions and things like that are all built in, but in the US we don't. So we want to have that built in. Now, the second vessel is for things that you want. And we're going to put a certain amount in there. And then the rest you're going to get to keep to spend every day as you go along. And then you decide what it is you want. And then when you have that money in that vessel, you'll get to take it out and you can go buy what you want. And that does a couple of things. It gets them in the mindset of generating more money to flow into those vessels and watching that money grow so that they can get that thing that they want ultimately. And 2, it gets them in a structure of, I don't get to just have everything that I want in a moment. We don't get to just say, I want this and I'm going to get it right now. I have to do certain things. I have to take certain actions and I have to be responsible in a certain way in order to flow that money. And that money, as they get more and more excited about the different things they want, will flow more and more abundantly. And so they'll be able to get the things they want more quickly. And then the last thing is they may look at that thing that they want and look at that money sitting in that vessel and say, I don't know if I want to spend my money on that. I don't know if I want it that badly. I kind of like watching the money grow here for a little bit longer. There's something else I'd like to get. So it gets them in that world of choosing powerfully rather than just that impulse.
Good advice. Money flows to them so easily. It's just crazy. Everywhere they go, they get free stuff, and they always get money from the grandparents. It's just like,
yeah, and I think it's important to bring everyone in on that conversation. So you could actually go speak with their grandparents and say, here's what I'm implementing because I want to get them in this kind of groove of relating to money. So when you give them money, what I'd like you to say is, now make sure you allocate it to your 2 different vessels and then how much you're going to keep. And you can create a formula right off the bat. We're going to put 50% into this one. We're going to put 10% into this one or 20% into this one. And then the rest we're going to put into this one, 40%, 30%, whatever the numbers work out, so that they're clear. It's in writing. It's not like, oh, I feel like this today. Nope. This is the formula. It's set in stone. And this is how we flow our money every single week or month or however that looks. Now, when the money starts to grow and it starts to build in those vessels, we want to move it from those smaller vessels into a larger vessel. And the larger vessel is called a bank, right?
Yeah.
So, we've got this glass, for example. It'll only, if it was raining money, which it is every day, that universal band of energy called money is flowing around us all the time. If I were to have a glass this size and I were to hold it up, I could only catch so much. My capacity, this glass's capacity, is only so much in terms of money. Now, I could try to compress it in and get as much in, but ultimately at some point it's going to be full and no more is going to be able to get into that vessel. So what do? We connect that vessel with another vessel that's larger so that we flow the money out of one vessel into the other. And a bank is almost unlimited. Here in the United States, we have something called FDIC where it's insured. So that number is right now, I think it's at $500,000 per account. That's a lot of money. You could actually connect into that vessel. And then as soon as that fills up, what do? You open up another account. and start flowing into that second account. We do the same things as individuals. My capacity to keep money, to understand and grow the money that I have is super important, because if I reach my capacity, all the rest of the money that comes to me is going to disappear, which is why I train my clients to expand their own capacity to keep money. Most people, if I said, look, I'm going to give you $1 million, I'm going to give you £1 million right now, tax-free. What are you going to do with it? Well, I'm going to buy a car. I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to go get my mom and dad a house because I love them. I'm going to go on vacation. They're talking about all these ways to disappear money versus, well, what are you going to actually do with that money to leverage it and have it build and create more money for you, build and create more wealth? That's when we're in the conversation I want them to be in, expanding their own capacity around money. I know I just went on for a long time, but I get excited and I just start talking.
We didn't have any clue about that, by the way. I'm just No, it was very obvious. It was very, very obvious that that's something you're passionate about. And I love that. That's one of the things I like about having guests like you on the program. I love the passions that come in. They're really great.
Yeah.
Speaking of passion, now passion, of course, is tied directly to emotion. And we touched on that earlier, but we haven't really gone in that direction yet in a big way. I want to go there, partly because for myself, one of the most important elements in my own growth pattern and in my ability to remove my own blocks from my own financial experience and other experiences as well, relationship experience, health experience, all that kind of stuff, has been to recognize the role that emotion plays and how I feel about the emotions. And the reason I mention that is I suspect this is actually true of a lot of people. For the longest time, now I'm 67 now. I discovered the law of attraction when I first saw The Secret. That was my first awareness of the term. I was aware of positive thinking before that, but the idea of law of attraction was new to me until The Secret came out in 2006. So in some ways I was kind of behind the curve because I had already grown, 55 years or whatever it was. And then all of a sudden The Secret comes out. Okay, well, now I got 55 years to overcome. But one of the things that I discovered along the way of watching that and trying to make sense out of it, it was one of the reasons I actually started this podcast, because it didn't make total sense to me. The basic concept of law of attraction didn't make any sense to me. I mean, it kind of did. I got it, but no, that was too airy-fairy for me. It didn't work. And I came to realize why it didn't work. It wasn't just that I didn't believe it. It's that emotionally I didn't believe it. My emotions, I had fallen into a pattern that I think a lot of people fall into, which is our experiences drive our emotions. That was the belief I had. In fact, I had it so deeply ingrained that I literally thought it was impossible to choose a different emotional response to an event. I didn't think that was even in the cards. It's just, whatever was dealt to you, that's what you're going to have an emotional response to. It's going to be whatever that default is. And when I was going through all this, I was going through this married, and my ex-wife made a really interesting suggestion one day, because she knew I was struggling. She knew I was trying to figure out ways to overcome this and learn how to apply this law of attraction, learn to see if it actually worked and all that kind of thing. And she said, you like to take walks every day. Why don't you go out and take a walk today? But while you're taking the walk, why don't you just take some time to just appreciate the plants, appreciate the flowers, appreciate the animals, and see if you can use that as a way to shift how you feel. Because right now you're feeling kind of mets, and I was like in a middle mode. I wasn't feeling great. I wasn't feeling bad. I was just, feeling kind of, ugh. So I said, okay, I'll try to do that. It was the first time I ever consciously tried to shift my emotional state. And of course it worked, because when you do that with nature, it's really easy to do. But I didn't know that. I didn't realize that was true. So that was an eye-opening experience for me. It was a soul-opening experience. Like, oh my God, I actually have control over my emotional response. And as soon as I said that to myself, I said, oh shit. No wonder everything's falling apart. I've been playing with this idea that I have no control. I'm sitting at the steering wheel that I can't see, and the steering wheel is going on its own because I'm not hanging on to it, because I don't think I have any control. Right. And now all of a sudden I haven't had the control all along. Oh, shit.
Well, it's one of the most empowering and frightening thoughts that we can have, that we are absolutely 100% the controller of our own destiny, the responsible for our life experiences. It is for some people terrifying to think, wow, my life is the way it is and it sucks and it's all me. I can't believe that. That's not true. But there's what you're saying has validity to it, and something that I truly think when people grab a hold of, suddenly they've got the reins of their life, because your power is no longer in someone else's hands. Your power to your happiness, your success is right here in your hands. No one
I
else.
also had to learn how to steer the steering wheel. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
gone 50 years without steering. Now all of a sudden I had to learn how to steer.
Yeah, and shift the gears and change the radio
Gears,
station and
pedals,
play talk
everything.
on the phone all at the same time. It's true. But in that moment, we get the sense of true power, what true power looks like. And there's this great analogy that one of my old mentors, when I first started on this path, shared with me. And she said to me, you know, there's this man's walking along the road and he comes up to this guy and he's got a pick and he's chipping stones and he's sweating and he's cursing and he looks just miserable. And the traveler says to him, what are you doing? He says, I'm just chipping these stones. I'm just chipping these stupid stones. And the traveler's like, okay. And he carries on down the road and he comes up onto another guy who's got a pick and he's chipping stones, but he's whistling and he's humming and he's so happy. And he says to him, what are you doing? And the guy says, I'm building a cathedral. It was the context in which he was operating that gave his entire experience of doing the exact same thing, the exact same physical activity. And there's a different experience. And we've all seen this. We've seen somebody experience something and have one emotional response. And we've had somebody else experience the exact same thing and have a completely diametrically opposed emotional experience. It's not a fluke. It's not that one is better than the other. It's just one has the ability to create the experience that they have based on the experience that they want. And so when we tap into that emotional vibration, that emotional feeling in the moment, you can literally change your life experience in the instant. Your entire view will change. Just like, but for a lot of people, when they're upset, first thing I'll say is, okay, I'd like you to smile. When we physically put a smile on our face, our entire physiology changes. And suddenly that annoyance, that upset starts to diminish. And so we can take on feeling from our heart center, letting go of the negative thoughts. Look, we're all so well trained. As Dr. Joe Dispenza says, those neural pathways have been firing and wiring together for decades and decades. We're so used to that. X happens, we do Y. It's like an old jukebox. You know, you press B1 and this is the song that plays. We have to interrupt those patterns. And we have to recognize that interrupting those patterns takes a couple of things. One is we have to recognize it in the moment. Now, you may not recognize it in the moment. You may recognize it the next day, but that's a good start. Then the next time you'll recognize it an hour later. And then the next time oh, I'm in it. I got it. I caught it. Great. In that moment, we interrupt it and we start to create a new neural pathway that will be what we want. Well, normally I would get annoyed by this. So I'm going to let that go. And I'm going to actually practice being happy about this or being neutral about this. And then asking a question to create a conversation that forwards to the goal that I'm committed to. So these are things that they do take work. This is not for the faint of heart. This is not for people who just want to sit on the couch and eat bonbons. If that's what you want to do that. I'm fine with that.
Good luck with that, but
it may not result in what you're looking for, but I don't have a judgment about it. But if you're somebody who wants to do this, it is going to take some work and it is going to be challenging. But we know that we're up to something big when we're experiencing that challenge, when we're feeling that press. It's like going to the gym. It's really hard to push that weight. And the next day we're sore and we're like, but it's a good sore. And we know we're going to get the results that we want. That's when you know you're expanding your capacity. If you're not feeling that, you're not expanding, you're contracting, because there is no standing still. We're either expanding or we're contracting. So if you're in the conversation of expanding, make sure you're putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. Make sure you're dealing with those challenges from a perspective of, I'm expanding my own capacity as a human being. I'm growing myself every single day by putting myself in uncomfortable situations. and getting better and better at dealing with them in a powerful way rather than a disempowering way.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're really describing is the mystery of the magical mystery tour. Because, and that's literally the way I think about it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I was one of those people who was my whole approach was very rational, very linear, very logical. And then I encountered this stuff and that kind of got blown out of the water. But literally it was still there. It's not like it had gone away. It's just that it kind of got overshadowed because I realized that it wasn't working. It wasn't producing the kind of result that I thought it was supposed to produce. Yeah. That I was told, that I'd been promised that it was going to produce. It didn't do it. Well, it's got to be something else then if it isn't that. I was a fan of Sherlock Holmes. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle used to say it often in the Sherlock Holmes stories: when you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
Yeah.
And I believed that, because what else could it be? There's no other possibility at that point.
Right. And but I think where people get tripped up is they don't realize that they haven't looked at all the possibilities. They've only looked at the possibilities that they see. And this is why having a mentor is so important, because it opens our view up to things that we never even realized were right there for all of us. There's a world that's right next to us. It's right here, but we can't see it because we haven't opened our eyes to it yet. And a mentor can say to us, Pericles, look at what you're not seeing. What about this? They can ask the questions that have us suddenly looking at things in a different way. And then all of a sudden this whole new world opens up and you think, wow. And then we think, as I said in the very beginning around mastery, we can think one of two things. Well, I've arrived and I'm done, in which point you're now contracting.
Yeah.
Or you can think, wow, what's next? What other worlds are out there that I've never noticed before that I want to discover? You know, the universe is ever expanding. It's not contracting. It's ever expanding. If we're ever expanding, we can match that. And it's limitless what we can accomplish.
Oh, yeah. Well, the reason I was even referring to the experience as the Magical Mystery Tour is that what you described definitely plays out. It just never plays out the way you expect it to.
Yes.
One of my favorite recent television series, I'm not much on watching television, but I did like the Ted Lasso series that came out. And there was a great quote that came out of that particular series. There were a number of them, actually, but there was one really good one that applies to this situation. It came from the woman who was the therapist in the show. And the therapist says, the truth will set you free, but first it's going to piss you off. And it's really true, because what happens is you start making shifts. You make the little micro shifts, the little micro changes. I realize, oh my God, I actually can control what my response is going to be to a situation. I don't have to be locked into the default. And so I start trying to play with that, and I mess up and I screw this up. And there's like this whole crazy weavy kind of a path that I end up on. And then all of a sudden one day I end up in an entirely different kind of space in an entirely different direction. And I make a shift and it worked. Like, what? What happened? Because it never goes linear. It's always winding all over the place. So probably the hardest part of doing this kind of work, of trying to shift ourselves and to try something new and to get out of that comfort zone, is being okay with the fact that it's not going to play out the way you thought it did. It's going to play out in ways that sometimes scare the hell out of you. Sometimes they excite you. Sometimes they bore you. But it's never going to be what you thought it was. And you have to be willing to say, okay, that's the journey. That's where I'm on. That's
the adventure of life. That's what makes life so exciting.
Yeah.
You know, if we always knew how things were going to go, it would get really boring. It reminds me of this old Twilight Zone episode where this guy thinks he's in heaven. He's actually in hell, but he thinks he's in heaven. And the devil says, you know, well, he was a gambler, right? And he wins everywhere he goes. Every casino he goes into, he's always winning the jackpots. The most beautiful women are all around him. He's got and after a week of this, he's bored. He's like, I want something exciting to happen in my life. I want something unknown to happen in my life. I'm so tired of knowing I'm going to win every single time. That is not what life is all about. We like the idea of that, we think that that's really good, but it's not the way it goes. And it's not the best way for us to experience life. We have to experience things we don't want in order to know what we do want. It's those contrasts that make life rich. It's like, I encourage everyone who has the opportunity to travel, go to other cultures, go to other states where they do things differently, they relate to things differently, because it will enrich your own life when you embrace it from, wow, my way is not the only way. There are people all over the world who do things differently, and they live extraordinary lives as well. I don't have to take on how they do it, but I can appreciate that somebody does things differently. That's the adventure. That's the joy, the joie de vivre of life that they're talking about. Embrace that in every step of your life. And life, at the end of your life, you're going to turn back and think, wow, I lived the life that I wanted to. It was amazing. It was fun. It was happy and adventurous.
Yeah. Now, what we've been talking about here, you have under a title, because this is actually all built into a course, among other things. It's an online course, I believe, called The 4 Keys to Resetting Your Financial Thermostat. And well, first of all, tell us about the course. Before I even go any further, just tell us about the course for a second.
Well, a lot of people will ask me what I do, and they'll start ask questions. And one of the things I wanted was to provide something to anyone who's interested, and it's completely free. All you do is enter your email address, and then you've got access to it. And it's the 4 keys to resetting your financial thermostat. And it's a really foundational program that allows people to look at, well, how do I recognize what my financial thermostat setting is? And then how do I go about resetting it? What are the best steps? And so the 4 keys are those 4 keys that will allow you to do that. We've gotten off in this conversation into some really amazing tangents, but that's where we go when we talk about money. Money is integrated into everything we do. There is literally no one on this planet that can't interact with money in some way. There's some people that can go their whole lives without a real intimate relationship or a real close relationship or without ever owning a car. There's certain things we can go through life without interacting with. Money is one of the few things that almost all of us, there are exceptions to every rule, but almost all of us deal with. And when we start to create an empowering relationship with money, our whole relationship to ourselves starts to shift. And then our relationship to other people starts to shift. And that's why this is such an expansive conversation. And I love it so much. So that masterclass, the 4 keys to resetting your financial thermostat, is a great foundation for people to just start on the journey and start to take a look at it. And at the end of it, you've got all the tools that you need to start to reset your financial thermostat. And then there's some options if it's some of you want to continue on what the steps would be with me or with someone else. If you want to work with someone else, it's always about finding the thing that works and fits for you.
See, now, Amory, that's a great guest, because my next question was going to be, how does somebody reach out to him? He just described it at the end of that little thing that he was doing. Talk about anticipation. I mean, that's really cool. I like that. So we'll just send them to the webpage there, and that way they'll find you. This is great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. And it's, as I've said, it's my passion. It's one of the things I recommend everyone do. You should have your passion written down, and it should be on a little card. And you should wake up every morning and read your why. Why are you here? What is your purpose? What is it that lights you up and inspires you? Have that be what starts your day. And then read it before you go to bed into that dream world. Have it be the thing that launches you into your dream state. So you're bookmarking your day on both ends and then going into your dream state inside of that why. It will keep you inspired. It will keep you motivated, because look, there are times when things are challenging, and there are times when we just we just want to throw our hands up. But when we've got that why in front of us, it keeps us going.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Amory, you've had an hour now to absorb all of Pericles' wonderful bits of wisdom here. This has been really, really fun. And I've watched you absorbing it all. What's grabbing your attention the most? I mean, if you tie it all together today, what's your tie together?
Do you know what? I've just got 2 words in my head. I've got power and trust. And I think throughout this whole conversation, it's like, take your power, understand your power, find your power. You can change anything And by not listening to the little voice in your head, take that power back, you can change it all. And then with the trust, it is trust the process, because you're absolutely right. How many times have we like had really shitty stuff happen to us and it's turned out to be the best thing? And it's just trusting that process. And I certainly find myself certainly in the moment, because like I have noticed my money and I'm just like, just going to trust it. It's in your hands. You know, I'm trusting you. Mm-hmm. And so those two words have literally been capital letters in my head. Is power. Yeah. Own your power. You've got the power, and trust the process.
See how good she is at that, Pericles?
Anne-Marie, that was just brilliant. You just recreated me so well. I'm truly moved. Thank you for sharing that. That was extraordinary.
Oh, thank you for sharing your story. It put power and trust in my head.
Yes, thank you.
Well, we've got one more thing to do before we sign off for the day. And this is something that I started doing about 2 years ago, because I noticed there was a gap in the way that we recognize what goes on in this world. It's one that we're all kind of subconsciously aware of, but we don't really pay attention to it. And I said, I'm going to start paying attention to it because I can do something about this. Because I noticed that not only, me doing this show and people like Anne-Marie doing the show as my co-host, and then guests like you coming on, we're all creating in many, many ways. And what the creations that I see are directly related to the show, but they're also related to the stories that we tell and to, the various experiences we share and so forth, the teachings that we give. And a lot of it we're giving out there, we're not charging for it. We're just putting it out there. You come onto this show, other shows, and I'm sure you do other, I don't know all the things that you do, but you probably do a lot of stuff. Maybe you do social media posts, maybe you do blogging. I don't know all the things that you do. You have the course, the master class. You have a lot of things like that you're doing that people are consuming. They're getting value from. They're being helped in ways you don't even know about, that you've never seen. You never will see. You'll never know about it. And that's where I noticed there was the gap. The gap was we don't recognize that. So Pericles, on behalf of those people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, on their behalf, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this world.
Thank you for that acknowledgement. I really appreciate it, Walt. That is, it's everything. I'm moved, and you've got me speechless. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. I'm speechless. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you both. This has been an extraordinary conversation, and I hope it's made a difference for people.
Wow, I actually got 4 or 5 incomplete sentences in a row. How about that?
And that is a feat. Congratulations.
Well, thank you, Pericles, so much for joining us today. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.